Hello, everybody. This is Night Flight, and I'm Judith Krober. And my very special guest today is Bernhard Guenther from veilofreality.com and bernhardguenther.com. Bernhard, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Judith, for having me, and thanks for pronouncing my name correctly.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah. So, yeah, on that note, we talked about it before. I've been living here in California for over half of my life, 23 years. So German gets a bit trickier for me to speak.
Now you have to put up with my English.
That's all good.
So Bernhard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, actually, I was born in Los Angeles. My parents are both from Germany. My dad studied at UCLA, and when I was 1 year old, they moved back to Germany, to Munich, and I grew up there until 22. I made my Abitur in Munich University, and then was sick and tired of the whole, running the rat's race, so to speak, and questioning everything. I was just not happy, and found a passion with drums, playing drums, and then just quit university. Saved up some money and moved to Los Angeles to go to music school to study drums and percussion. And I just stayed here because I had citizenship too. Played in bands for many years, toured around, recorded an album, lived the musician's lifestyle in Hollywood, which is an experience in itself. But throughout all this process, a lot of stuff came up for me, and emotionally, psychologically, I started to question the world. I was dealing with depression and all of that. So it forced me, my suffering, to, like I said, question the world and start looking to heal myself. And that I was introduced to psychedelics, to yoga, massage, and bodywork, which I found another talent, the healing arts, and I pursued that. And then I started to research more, started writing, putting my thoughts out there, moved away from LA into nature, to Topanga Canyon out here. And and then that's just one thing led to the other. I started producing some films with my friend based on my writings 8 years ago. And I'm living now doing healing work, body work, holistic coaching. I host retreats, workshops, webinars. And my work ranges, from, anything questioning official history to politics, which I'm not concerned with itself anymore, because for me, that's just a symptom. To psychology, esotericism, and more into the fringe, hyperdimensional realities and the forces who really control this world, up to the awakening process and inner self-work, esoteric self-work, and all of that.
And you lately had a webinar about that.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So the week before that webinar, I had the announcement in my email. And so I went to the page and I read something that I found mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably not that unusual, but it is not very often talked about. And I wrote it down. And you wrote that oftentimes they are not even actually dealing with entity interferences, but with thought formations of their own, which have become entities.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, we drive ourselves nuts with obsessive thinking. And yes. Is that correct?
Very true, yeah. I mean, that's also when you study occult esoteric literature about these hidden forces, the occult forces, they also talk about thought projections, psychic attacks coming from other people through their own minds, or when we brood over another person or have obsessive compulsive thinking, right? And that any thought creates a certain energy, right? And then these thoughts can become literally living beings in themselves and haunt ourselves. In a sense, we can curse ourselves that way. And, there's a distinction to be made, like you just mentioned when you quoted me, because there are entities, occult forces, hidden. Occult simply means hidden, by the way. It's nothing evil, right? The word on the root meaning. But there are entities, beings, forces, archons, whatever you may call it. Every different culture or esoteric teaching has talked about them in their own words, which are not reflections of our own shadow or part of ourselves, as maybe modern psychology or even Jungian psychology would claim it is, but they live in their own world, their own realm, and they actually manipulate and control us in various ways, which is what I talk about a lot in my work. But besides that, then also we, through our own thinking and emotional obsessions, we can create, so to speak, entities as thought formations or based on thought formations, which then hunt us. There's like a feedback loop, so to speak. The best example is exactly, I addressed that yesterday at the webinar in the topic of sexual vampirism. And now at this day and age of porn, for example, or people, I'm not nothing against anything masturbating, but a lot of people then have these thought projections, especially men, and watch a lot of porn, and like you just feed something, you feed an image, and you literally create an entity that feeds off of that kind of lower nature sexual loosh, and that's how addictions are formed as well, right? That's a basic example. Or anything else, like, a lot of people, when they get, the mind is the trickster,
Mm-hmm.
Many of us get into the fear, worry frequency, right? Which is actually an illusion. Fear literally is an illusion because it's based on time. You're afraid of what may happen to you, because in the present moment, there's no fear. It doesn't exist, right? You're only afraid of what might happen. So people who are afraid a lot, worry a lot, then they can also create, their own reality in this way. But I want to definitely separate that from the very much distorted new age idea of law of attraction, or you create your own reality, because it's not always when you have negative thoughts or whatever, you right away create it in your reality. Sometimes what the quote unquote negativity you experience in life could be occult attacks from these entities and has nothing to do with your own thinking, right? Mm-hmm. And the new age fallacy is also then they ignore the dark or the negative and then just force themselves to think positive and all this, and that can create actually more damage than any good in the long run, simply for the fact of shadow suppression, and it has to come out on some way or the other.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And but it seems that we can become our worst enemies.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, the wonders that obsessive thinking can do.
Yeah, especially for people who are more mental, more head-centric, especially in this day and age, there's a body-mind split in the whole modern world. It is all head-centric. We grow up in the world, our educational system worships the intellect, the mind, memorizing information. We don't learn anything about intuition, body-mind connection, emotional intelligence. We don't learn anything about. And then even with the technology nowadays, everybody's now addicted to their smartphones, and everything is so head-centric. So we lose the connection to the body, our internal guidance. So we're caught in the mind, and then most people fall into the trap of believing their own thoughts or identifying with thoughts. And that's the whole point of an esoteric or spiritual practice, meditation, all of that is to kind of detach from thoughts, to get out of the mind, right? And get more into your body and your inner guidance in the gut, for example, and all of that, and develop extrasensory perception. Having said that, that doesn't imply to demonize the mind. We also need to understand how to use the mind correctly with basic critical thinking, right? Understanding logic and all of that. But even that is limited, right? There's higher knowledge, gnosis, which the mind or logic cannot grasp. And that is the whole part of inner work, right? To go beyond the mind and touch on something deeper.
Mm-hmm. So how do we distinguish between an actual entity attack and one that, let's say we have it self-inflicted?
Yeah, that's exactly a whole chapter on the webinar I did yesterday. That's the difference between rejecting and integrating.
Okay.
So from a Jungian psychology, which has its place, it's very important, shadow work, absolutely. But I definitely feel it has its limitations, and I have problems with anyone or using that as a foundation to view the world through, because not everything is part of our shadow needs to be integrated. A lot of it is, right? when we have stuff we have experienced in childhood, we haven't, or everyday stuff, we haven't broken relationship or whatever, and we haven't truly grieved, for example, and we stuff away the feelings and avoid it and jump from relationship to relationship, for example, or just anything, buffer up with addictions to avoid feeling. But sometimes we need to feel these feelings, be it grief, loneliness, and then feel them, maybe even cry, and that's how you transmute them, that's how you integrate them, for example, right? But then there's also a lot of thought injections we are being exposed to from these other forces, who then try to, you have to understand the interrelationship between thought and emotion. Every thought creates a certain emotion, right? So these forces try to keep us in a lower frequency of ego consciousness and lower vibration and negative thoughts and emotions, because that's simply food for them, that frequency, right? In a nutshell. But a lot of that, when you again study esoteric occult literature, they talk about that these suggestions need to be rejected as not part of your true self, which is very different than suppressing them. So it's very subtle. But to answer your question, to know the difference, that it's not a mental process. It's really hard to even put into words. So there's no general guideline, because this perception, being able to differentiate, comes with the inner work, with the esoteric self-work, to raise your level of high being, to, especially through deeper meditation practices, to install the objective observer, the witness within, right? And you become more sensitive, and then you can sense what comes from the outside and what is, coming more from yourself. So that's, anybody who's sincerely engaged in self-work, in these practices, ancient, like esoteric science, will eventually then also you will be able to spot the difference.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, fearful people, or people that carry a lot of paranoia, they are more prone to develop these thought entities.
Yeah, they not only develop, but they attract them as well. See, that's the irony. That's the irony in the equation. Like a lot of people, when I talk about these topics and they find them scary and fearful and get into paranoia, oh my God, they are negative, or they are hidden forces that influence me. I cannot see them, and then they already get into fear and paranoia, which is counterproductive. That's the irony in it. But then ignorance is not a defense either, right? Just ignoring them is not a defense. That's also a cold law. You have to know thy enemy, so to speak, or know what you let's put it this way. You cannot protect yourself from something you're not aware of, right? So you need to understand the modus operandi and how they work. But in, again, all the occult teachings, it said, the worst thing you can do is to react with fear, because that's exactly what they want. So it's on the most basic level, with or without force, is really to reject any thoughts of fear as an illusion, as not part of the self. For example, going back to the obvious thing that fear is an illusion. Danger can be real, but fear is an illusion. For example, like say you're somewhere in the jungle or whatever, and the tiger, is there ready to charge at you, right? There's danger, obviously, but still fear is a choice. If you react with fear, you might not actually, that's a lot of people, when they get in panic, you see that, and then other people get in panic and fear and mass, and a lot of damage is done. And so you can still, react, more embodied and grounded and present with the conscious response to danger, but not in the fear frequency. And that's sometimes easier said than done, because the fear comes out very mechanically, automatically, right?
Yeah, because once you are in this fight or flight mode.
Fight or flight, exactly. Yeah. And fight or flight, it has its place, back in the days when we were literally needed to run away from tigers and bears or whatever. But in this day and age, a lot of people react with fight and flight to not everyday stressful situations, which it's not necessary, so to speak, right? It's just mechanical. In fact, most people are always stuck in fight and flight. There's so much up in their heads, and the nervous system is so overloaded. Relates to, you cannot blame people either. I can relate to that. All of us have some sort of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, just from growing up in a pathological society that's normalized. So, a lot of people are just in fight and flight, in stress response all the time without knowing it.
Okay. So let's say it finally dawned on us that it doesn't really matter how we vote, and that religion doesn't quite cut it, and many other things that were sold to us as probable solutions. And then we stumble on these videos, articles that always say, do your inner work. So how do we start that?
Yeah, the question is already like, what, at a foundation level, what do you mean by we? Because that's a whole other topic, because while we all one, we're not all the same, and not everybody is ready to do this kind of work, which is no negative judgment. It's just with over 7 billion people on this planet, there are vast different levels of being and soul development, and some are just not here to wake up or do that inner work based on where they're at on a soul level, right?
Yeah. So
first of all, understanding that not everybody is here to wake up and do the work. So this word "we" is being overused, which ties into this, it's being used against us with the socialist new world order that we're experiencing, and trying to make everybody the same, the disease of homogenization of humanity, right? So not everybody's geared to this work, but, it will come to the ones who are truly sincere. Then the door is open, and you cannot force people to wake up. You cannot tell people you have to do inner work. The call needs to come from oneself. Like it came for me. The catalyst was my own suffering. Suffering has its purpose in that sense, to find for some deeper meaning or truth within, right? And then the inner work is about confronting the self, realizing that we've been living, believing in lies, living a life based on lies, based on severely social, cultural, religious conditioning, taking on beliefs, through growing up in official culture, education, that are simply not true, and following, desires, wants, and needs that are not even our own, but have been implanted by us through society, through our parents, and all of that. So it's shedding that, getting out of the ego personality, which most people identify with as the true self, but the true self is hidden behind that personality mask. And then beyond that, there's a lot of wounds and trauma all of us deal with, just growing up in a society like this. Nobody has been perfect. There are deeper karmic lessons, past life, and all of that, everything comes into the equation. And the inner work is about finding this true self, because we're very complicated people. You see it even, we have very contradictory even desires, wants, and feelings, and that already shows. So where's the true self? One day we want this, one day we want the opposite, right? So to find that unity, the inner work is about unifying the self around the true self, and essentially about connecting to the divine, right? The higher self, God, whatever you may want to call it, which is obviously not a authoritarian figure up in the sky in the religious sense, but is the higher force, so to speak. So, but that process in itself is very different for each, and we're all unique beings, and everybody has different soul lessons and talents. So while there are general ways how to go about it, and all the esoteric teachings talk about it in the same way in their own words, how it manifests for each individual is different.
Are there traps on the way?
Well, they're always, yeah, because obviously a lot of these forces, there's an archetypal war between dark and light, and there's certain forces that do not want us to wake up, right? They like to keep us in the frequency prison. And there are many, many other traps we can fall into. One of the biggest traps I have definitely fallen into, sometimes still fall into, is the trap of superiority. When we start to realize truth, see through the illusions and all of that, and then we feel we are better than other people. We look down on other people, call them sheeple and whatnot, and project onto them. And that's already like, that's a trap of superiority. You're not awake. And also awakening is a process, right? The true meaning of the word awake is basically the enlightened state. So we need to develop humility as well. And there's then spiritual bypassing as a big trap, where we overestimate our state of being or avoid deeper work that truly confront our shit, so to speak, our shadow, and not spiritual bypass it with new age stuff or even with psychedelics or medicine plants, as people do, and get and then get hooked to the peak experience, but don't do the inner deeper work. So yeah, those are the traps, and there are many, many others. In fact, I wrote an article exactly about that, or an essay called the perilous path towards awakening, and that goes deep into all the traps. So I have actually a lecture too on my videos that goes specifically about that. It's called The Traps on the Path Towards Awakening.
I know that there are a lot of people out there that do, the word is gone, that remove entities from others. Personally, I have to say that I would not just jump right into it.
Jump into what?
Yeah. Just choose anybody who is offering this.
Oh yeah. That's, yeah. I mean, I talked about this on my webinar as well, like entity removal.
Because I would, my thought would be, how do I know that I do not end up with more entities?
Yeah, and also, like, first of all, and that's what I addressed in the webinar, that's just symptom management. Just removing entities, for example, is not enough, because the entry point needs to be cleared, because they can only enter through their own blind spot, unconscious blind spots, wounds, trauma. Anything can be a trap of agreement where we made a pact actually consciously, which I've talked about as well. So removing entities alone doesn't do much, especially in this day and age, since this topic has become more popular. I mean, so many people contact me if I remove entities. Like, no, I don't. Sometimes it comes up in my bodywork energy healing practice when the body's ready. Actually, I have experience of clients that their bodies ejected an entity. It literally came out because the body is healing itself if they're given the right conditions, and but it's specific for everyone. But it's all about going to the root cause. So in my case, as I mentioned, I talked also about my experiences in the webinar. The interferences and entity attachments I was dealing with, I was able to get rid of on my own, right, through applying occult techniques, canceling contracts, and especially doing my inner work to heal the entry points. That's the most important part. Removing entities doesn't do much, because they will come back tenfold, even if the entry point is not healed. Mm-hmm. Right. And I have a lot of, I have to say, a lot of charlatans out there in this day and age, promising all kinds of magical healing and all of that. So you got to be very discerning in this day and age with what's out there. Right. And even I say, like, I'm not a healer. A true healer helps another person to heal him or herself. That's really what it comes down to, right? To, give feedback, or maybe work on the body and to give it a tune up energetically, but it's still about the client or the person, the body, him or herself, to really do the work.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the techniques to remove them ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it in one of my essays, where I use meditation to identify what's going on, and then sometimes, like, those instances I felt really off, and when I'm feeling off, I don't distract myself. I sit with it in meditation. So in my meditation, I felt this block on my chest, my throat. Then right away, it was interesting. I started gagging and then crying. So all the stuff came up and some sadness, but then I still felt restless, and I felt to move my body. And I'm big into dance, conscious dance, free from dance, 5 rhythm, ecstatic dance. So I put on some really intense music to get into my anger. I needed to get into my anger and dance that out physically, express it through my body. And then after I did that for like 15 minutes, I collapsed on the couch. And then I felt, this entity, like just being on my aura, just attached right in my field. And then I used my righteous anger and the voice to cancel that, to make my boundary clear. Anger is another thing that has been misunderstood in spiritual cycles. Anger is a powerful force, righteous anger, to make your boundaries clear, to say no, right? And not fall into blind compassion. anger becomes toxic if you project it on another person, right? In terms of, from our own stuff. But, anger is appropriate response most often when our boundaries have been crossed. So that's what I did. And I used certain affirmations to call this entity out and, basically tell them back off. You're not allowed in here, canceling any form of agreements and contracts. And then I literally felt how this energy, this being, this entity, dissipated, moved away. It had to. It's by the law of free will, right? I made my boundary very clear in a very embodied manner as well. But the meditation and dance and all this before helped me to get into that state to be able to do that, because you first need to be able to identify it, right? So that's one example that worked for me.
Okay. Would you suggest to write the canceling of contracts ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I even mentioned the webinar yesterday over the weekend about affirmations. I gave some examples, but it's more powerful to actually form your own affirmations that are coming from you and not mechanically recite something somebody else wrote. Mm-hmm. Because the most important part of these information that you really say it and mean it, right? Also have the emotional power behind it and not just intellectually recite them. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay, because there is a lot of contract cancellation out there, and I'm not saying they are bad or they are wonderful. I'm just thinking about how useful is this.
Yeah, also on that note, which I also mentioned, all these cancellation affirmations don't do anything really if it's not combined with your inner work, right? You still you can cancel contract, but if they still have the entry points within you, then they're still going to come back around. So, just canceling contracts and just stating affirmations is definitely not enough. Mm-hmm. It's holistic, health is holistic and everything is related and interrelated. It needs a multidimensional approach.
I think in this field of, let's call it loosely hyperdimensional warfare, you can also easily fall into this victimhood.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'm constantly attacked.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one. I mentioned it over and over, the trap of victim blame, the victim blame trap, which we see not only hyperdimensional, but in the world at large. Mostly people always want to blame somebody else or some situation and get into the victim trap, which is a very disempowering state, right? And sometimes, but it's also, you don't want to go the opposite end and then blame yourself and then go into the shame and guilt spiral. It's like, it's beyond this, duality approach, but understanding that there's a bigger lesson. And sometimes people are quote unquote victims, but there's always more to the story, so to speak. Mm. Also how victim perpetrator even can attract themselves on metaphysical levels and all of that, So it's definitely important to take self-responsibility, especially with this hyperdimensional topic, these entities. And, I talked about it again. You go back to any of the occult esoteric teachings that talk about that. They also point out there's something within you that responded to them, that gave them a reason to come in, right? So it's about, from that occult perspective or spiritual perspective, you can actually utilize them as teachers. That's what they are from the higher soul evolutionary perspective. That's actually the role, so to speak, if people would understand that, because they highlight your own issues that's already there. So there's exaggerate them, so it's being magnified. And if you can use it like that, then that takes away the victim blame frequency, which they want you to get into to begin with. Because it is, again, a very disempowering state, being stuck in victim blame. So, and again, all the esoteric teachings also talk about that, the cosmic function of these hyperdimensional forces, right? Because even from a law of free will, they have a right to exist, right? They're part of duality. There's dark and light, right? And ironically, they're also on some level expressions of the divine experiencing itself subjectively, the dark side, so to speak, right? You see it in the yin and yang sign with the white dot in the dark and the dark dot in the white, right? Everything is interrelated and is one. But the whole point is essentially, to transcend duality. transcending, not meaning of denying it, avoiding it, but coming more to a unified state, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like on higher levels, it also then becomes very paradoxical, right? That, you know, we are being imprisoned and attacked by these forces, but at the same time, they have the teaching function, right? To help us kind of become more aware and conscious.
Mm. Let's say we achieve that. We become more aware and conscious, and these entities have to leave. What is there a lesson for them as well?
Yeah, they are in their own whatever evolutionary state. They're just what, you know, they're, you know, fulfilling their cosmic function, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but coming to a state that we are beyond them and they're not there anymore, that's like a state we cannot even possibly imagine at this moment. That's like a very high awakened state.
Okay.
Right? A very different frequency, a very different world. I mean, like I mentioned before, from a soul evolutionary or evolution of consciousness level, I feel we haven't even graduated kindergarten yet. So
I would agree.
We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you wrote something in your article as well. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that, where you said that shame and guilt is just like one step above death.
Yeah, that's based on the it's a very low frequency, and it has been for me. That's when I used to wallow a lot in guilt and shame, and that's when the suicidal thoughts kicked in for me, and I was suicidal in my 20s. And then this has been confirmed for me when I read David Hawkins' book Power versus Force. Very good book, where he has a map of consciousness, and he took over a decade to map out different levels of frequencies via muscle testing. And guilt and shame is like on the lowest level, right above death. Right, that's really, and many of us deal with guilt and shame on some level, right, which keeps us very disempowered, and where these forces also like to us to linger in, so to speak.
Okay.
So it's based on his book, David Hawkins, who has confirmed that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. But there is a lot on the way while growing up, and then, you know, where, and depending on how your parents interact with you, that a lot of times that is what you are being spoon-fed. You are not good enough.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's what, you know, everybody, I said, deals with guilt or shame on some level. I mean, look at this religion, you know. I mean, especially the Catholic Church is like, it's a guilt-ridden religion,
Yeah.
right? It's like, it's all about sin this and sin that, and, you know, this is bad and this is bad, and need to repent and all of that. It just, you know, but that's again from a hyperdimensional perspective. Also, these major religions have been created by these forces, right?
To do what?
To do what?
Yeah.
For control, to keep people like, you know, disempowered, to tell them the lie. There's some God externally of them judging them, right? And then and this nonsense that Jesus died for your sins and all of that, right? And just creates more guilt and shame, right? To keep people in this lower frequency, to keep them disempowered and feed off that frequency, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big topic.
Yeah, no, but I have to say, I have with this entire Jesus story, I have my problems with that.
Oh yeah, for me that's just I feel like I read the Bible. I feel there's a lot of truth in the Bible, actually. You know, but it's truth mixed with lies. It's heavily distorted, and most people take it way too literal.
Yeah.
And for me, the Jesus story, you see the story repeated in many other cultures, and as a, you know, and gods, so to speak. It's the same over, but it's a very symbolic story, right? Yeah. Even the Son of God is actually sun worship, literally. It's about the sun,
yeah,
you know, the life giver, and not a person. you know,
Yeah.
and the resurrection of Jesus and all of that, or dying at the cross, is actually also more symbolism of the death, you know, what you read in esoteric science, the death of the ego personality, of being reborn in the true self. That's all it is, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not to be taken literal.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is a long way until you figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on people's conditioning. I grew up in Germany. My dad is an atheist. He's still kind of warming up right now. He's getting into philosophy and Kant, but he couldn't care less about anything religious. My mom was more like a social Christian. So basically, we went only to church once a year for Christmas. So that was it. And I was also I wasn't raised Catholic, but Protestant. So it's easier that way. But I've never had that severe religious programming like many other people are dealing with.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree that religion is used as a mind control tool.
Yeah, it's a social engineering, social control mechanism.
Yeah, and it's still working beautifully.
It is, I know. I can see that, yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm a little bit astonished when I read comments, let's say on YouTube. And no matter what the topic is, you will find one or two at least who are telling you, Jesus is coming back, get ready, repent.
Yeah, I get these comments a lot, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if my work and.
So you're doomed as well.
I'm doomed, yes. I'm supposedly going to hell. So.
Yeah, but I don't believe there is a hell.
No, the hell is very expensive right now, so to speak, on this planet, you know. So it's just also, you know, again, it's about your own soul evolution, and heaven and hell is right here, this moment. Just matter how you see it and choose it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we have enough inner tyrants.
Inner what?
Tyrants.
Tyrants, yeah. The inner, yeah. Our own mind is the inner tyrant, right?
Yeah.
Supervisor in the head.
And he overrules a lot of things.
A lot of our, definitely most often overrules our intuitive insights, which we don't trust. Right.
Yeah. So in other words, it's better to place the mind in its correct place.
Yeah, so here, I mean, I did a whole webinar on that as well, called The Hero's Journey in the Process of Embodiment. And it's about, you know, it's also based on Philip Shepard is an amazing teacher, a man I've worked with as well and read his books. He wrote 2 books. What was it? New Self, New World, and Radical Wholeness. And it's about the embodiment process and about the alchemical marriage of the inner male and female. And I have a whole webinar that's also available on the website that goes into it. And in the marriage of the inner male and female, the alchemical process, regardless of gender, is about unifying both aspects of consciousness, so to speak, within. And the male aspect of consciousness is represented in the cranium, the head, the mental, the analytical, fragmentizing. And the feminine aspect of consciousness is in the body, in the gut, in the pelvic floor, the intuitive, all embracing. And we are now living out of our head. We have the male aspect is predominating, you know, even in women, right? Very mental, very head centric. Ironically, most feminists are actually deep in the coming from a male aspect of consciousness. They're not really feminine in a true esoteric meaning of the word. And what needs to be done is actually that the male needs to surrender to the feminine, right? The male aspect is doing, the feminine aspect is being. So mostly we just do, but we have no being. We don't tune into, we don't conceive wholeness, right? So we need to drop into our bodies, out of the head, into being, first being and then doing. So they both go together.
Mm-hmm. But that is also something that is being drilled into us.
Yeah, that's what I said at the beginning. Like, we just grow up right away with the IQ, the male aspect of consciousness being worshipped, right? We don't learn anything about the body, even deny the body. the church even denies it. The flesh is sinful, right? We don't learn anything about intuition, nothing about emotional intelligence. Again, the head is worship, the IQ.
Or even, let's say your mom or your dad catches you daydreaming, just sitting there doing nothing, and then something is being said like, don't you have anything to do?
Yeah, exactly. Like do. If it's like, some people tell you, ask you, hey, how you doing? You tell them I'm busy. I'm like, oh, that's a great thing. As if it's good to be busy all the time.
Yeah.
Right. We're addicted to doing, willful doing, right? And it doesn't imply to just be quote unquote lazy in the potato couch, but most of us are just, just mechanical, running on programs. We're just doing things that are not even, like I mentioned before, coming from our true self, but are programs installed by a society, culture, and all of that by growing up. And we are doing things according to one's needs and desires that I said before, not even our own. And that's why most people are not happy, because they're pursuing something that's not actually truly aligned with who they truly are on the soul level. And then they compensate too, right? Because they're unhappy, they have no inner happiness, so they try to fill that hole with stuff, with appearance, appealing to other people, with relationships and all of that. Cars, yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, there's always the overcompensation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, some men, maybe even women, probably, but for some people, definitely, as they grow older, the cars grow bigger.
Well, I have to say, I don't want to, at the same time, like, I don't want to demonize or say anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with abundance and materialism, right? I don't want to. I think that's a spiritual distortion as well, that you have to be poor and reject the material world.
No.
Fine, you want to embrace that, but where's it's coming from? There's a difference between like healthy, abundance, which goes way beyond money anyway. It's just feeling rich within yourself, and then enjoy yourself. But why do you truly, like, what's your true intention when you buy this fancy car, right? So you'd like to impress others, or you just like to enjoy yourself? There's nothing wrong with it. I don't judge people, but what's the true intention behind it? That's what it comes down to.
You just said something that I talked about this to somebody else, and that is this notion: do not judge.
Yeah, that has also been very distorted in the spiritual world. When I say not judging, I'm not saying I have, everybody has their free will. Like, you do what you want to do. I don't care, as long as it doesn't infringe on my own free will, right? I couldn't care less. But we all judge the moment we open our mouths. Judgment is discernment, right?
Yeah.
So when I see somebody acting pathological, that's okay, that's a judgment, but that's also can be the truth, so to speak. Right. And or we point out the lies in the world, all of that. The moment you open your mouth, it's a judgment. So you say anything. So that has been also distorted by this the New Age, especially, or even like in the East, this whole do not judge, or even the church, because that's how actually also gurus or pastors or pathological spiritual teachers in a way got away with abuse and all that, by simply telling them, don't judge me, right? Judging is bad. And then that's why people don't speak up, because they feel they shouldn't judge, and they get into like blind compassion and a very pseudo facade of spirituality, right? Of how it's supposed to be. And sometimes you need to call it out for what it is. So
yeah, exactly. I think that this very strict do not judge, that is total nonsense.
It's absolutely nonsense.
Yeah. Same with anger.
Same, like I mentioned before. Exactly.
Yeah. And then this whole other thing, it's just an experience.
Yeah, all of those. It all ties into spiritual bypassing too.
Yeah, exactly. So Where do you see humanity going in the near future in terms of the hyperdimensional realities?
I can only speak generally because I don't like to make quote unquote predictions because the future is not set in stone. But the biggest danger I see in terms of hyperdimensional perspective is the dawn of transhumanism and AI.
Yeah.
Because that's their last card to play, so to speak. I feel, or the end game, because they're trying to extract our soul essence by merging man with machine, and create incarnational opportunities of vessels for them to fully occupy us. So that's the danger I see definitely happening, and people are going to get along with it, and we can see it already how they make us. It's a long plan. They keep us, making us more addicted and dependent on technology, right? It has, again, technology is just a tool. We see it. Like we have a great Zoom podcast now, and but we become more and more dependent on that. Many of us, we cannot live without this anymore, right? So
I don't have one of these. I threw it away.
That's good. That's excellent. So, but essentially, the system was going to go so long, that it will be harder to exist within it, to actually even make a living, even by necessities, if you don't comply, so to speak. So there will be interesting days ahead, but I don't see it like in Terminator end time scenario, because I feel there's also the divine force. There's more people waking up, so it's going to be an interesting time. I'm not worried about the future. I think more shit is going to come down and it will be a rude awakening for a lot of people, but there's always some sort of equilibrium happen as well, because it's the dark versus light, right? And but yeah, I see from a hyperdimensional perspective, definitely the transhumanism and AI aspect is the next big thing. That's already on its way.
If I should summarize it, I would say what the hidden controllers would like to do is to have a society that is borderless, colorless, cashless, genderless, and clueless.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. Yeah. Well, it's tricky too, because I'm like, I don't buy this whole, I'm not really right or left. I'm against statism, right? And I see with the socialist New World Order, especially in Europe, right, what's happening, open borders and that. But at the same time, I have to say, not from a socialist, from their perspective, I still don't believe in borders. I think that's also people who are trying to stay okay, we keep the borders, nationalism and all of that. That's outdated too, this identification. So it's kind of tricky, right?
And that is what makes me especially angry, because at the end of the day, I would like to see a world without borders, but not this one.
Yeah, but not that not in a manipulated way like that. Not under a world government, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's what they're gearing towards, a world government.
Yeah. So they are. I think a lot of people would like to see that, but it comes down with this, like a hammer.
Yeah, and as people are being manipulated into it as well,
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Yeah.
But as the saying goes, sometimes things have to get worse and very bad until people wake up.
Yeah.
That goes back to mention before. That's the whole meaning of suffering from an esoteric perspective. How much more do people have to suffer until they truly question the world and themselves and start to do that work, right? But then again, not everybody's ready for that. So these are just very interesting times.
So when you do holistic body work, you talked a little bit about that. What do you do there?
Well, I do body work is a term I use. I call integrative body work because I use many different modalities I've learned and developed myself over the 15 years, from deep structural work, deep work, fascia-related work, to just also more flow, essence type massage, flow, full body, and to stretches, Thai yoga, Thai massage, to more energy work, craniosacral work, and anything in between depends on the person. I'm very intuitive. And, I feel like body work is an amazing modality that's way more than just pampering, but preventive medicine, right? It helps to kind of get out of the head, detox on a basic level. It activates like I mentioned before, the body intelligence to heal itself. I receive it at once. Yesterday I had a great massage bodywork session. It was awesome. I needed it. I do it once a week. So that's, part of it. And, it's very intuitive. It depends on the person I work with, right? And it's also about the energy that comes through. So it affects everybody differently. So that's just the part of my work. But then I also inquire of my clients what else is going on in their lives, and then I offer holistic coaching sessions, more like basic, spiritual psychological work in the sense, basic reflective work. I'm not a psychologist by any means. I'm not into, I'm not diagnosing anybody for anything. I'm just going beyond that. So for me, it's my intention is to help people to help them help themselves, right? To empower them and help them, through my writings, my work, or retreats, webinars, workshops, to kind of like so they can find their own way. That's really what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. And so if I would like to book a session with you, then I would do that via your website?
Yeah, I mean, the integrative bodywork session is only obviously for people who come to my studio. So I don't do remote bodywork. But yeah, on my website, holistic coaching sessions I offer, like over Zoom or Skype, or in person too. Sometimes, when people live here in the neighborhood, like LA area, they come to my place. And then I have like on my webpage webinars, I offer some live webinars, and then the recordings are available as well. I host workshops, I host retreats. Actually, the next big one will be at a private cruise in Croatia, which will be amazing. 7 days, I'll be there, a featured speaker. It's organized by an organization called Heaven to Earth. They invited me, and it will be September 7 to the sometime mid-September. I just forget the dates right now. That will be amazing. We'll be on a private yacht. And previous speakers who were invited to do this on this cruise were Graham Hancock and Nassim Miriam. So kind of honored to be part of it. It's a small boat. It's only 30 people, but will be daily lectures, talks, and we check out the amazing locations around the Adriatic Mediterranean Sea. And I've also, my partner Laura and we're also going to start to do workshops and webinars together. In fact, at the cruise, we're also both hosting a workshop on evolutionary relationships, right? So we're doing this kind of work together as well. And yeah, for anybody, there's all the information is on my website, veilofreality.com.
Is that already fully booked? No,
it's still there's still space available. It's just also early on. Seems like people don't make plans that far away. Sometimes like it's September, it's almost a little less than a year. But for anybody's interested, there's still actually some discount tickets available, I believe. It goes, all the information's on my website, and then it links to the Heaven to Earth organization because it's going through them. And as a matter of fact, I don't actually know how many people have already signed up at this point, but there's still space available.
Mm-hmm. And do I understand correctly that if I would like to buy one of your webinars, I could still do that even though the webinar itself has been done already?
That's correct. Yeah, I've done 2 webinars, a shorter one, The Hero's Journey in the Process of Embodiment, that's available to purchase at my website. And the one I just did, that's a long one, 8-hour webinar in 2 parts. I did over the weekend, and I just uploaded the webinar videos, separate audio file, and the slides. There's 140 slides I used. So that's our call forces of hyperdimensions, protection and clearing techniques and discernment. And that's also now already available also to purchase from my website as well.
That's great. Because sometimes it's I missed it.
Exactly, I do it live because also my audience is, even I did the webinar, it's hard to find the right time because my audience is really all over the world. I have many, like obviously from the US, Canada, many from Europe. but also many from Australia and New Zealand. So that's a whole different time zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you know, the live webinar is good also just at the end for some Q&A, you know. But you know, the information is definitely anybody can purchase it and get it afterwards.
Okay, that's wonderful. So, any final words, any advice that you would give people?
No, and advice, I mean, for me, it's just like, you know, the only question I always like to ask people, what is your intention in life? What is your aim? What do you truly want, right? As Ajay Shanti said, I like his work a lot. Do you truly want to awaken, or do you just want to have a happy dream life? That's a good question to meditate on.
And then you trust the process once you
Trust the
made
process. And then another question, how sincere are you really with yourself? Because the sincerity is key. I see a lot of people, they're more curious here and there, but they're not really truly sincere in their own process when it comes to the self-work and inner work. Right? So that's another question.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes, as you said, sometimes your own suffering will lead you down that road.
Yeah, it has definitely for me.
So
on these questions, I ask myself constantly as well. I put the mirror up for myself, right?
Yeah. Wonderful. So Bernhard, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judith.
And I hope you have a wonderful cruise.
Thank you. I hope so. Yeah, that would be nice. I'm looking forward to it. I have a good feeling about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it will be really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys. This was Night Flight. See you next time.
Thank you.